Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I've lived in my house for over 15 years and never had any issues with my neighbors. Everyone pretty much kept to themselves, but were friendly enough to wave or say hello. That all changed when the Wilson family moved in next door about 6 months ago. From the very start, Janet Wilson rubbed me the wrong way. She just had an air about her that screamed, "I'm better than you." She was one of those types who always had her nose in the air. The first week they moved in, she came knocking on my door, interrupting my dinner. When I answered, she demanded I give her a copy of my mailbox key. "Excuse me?" I said, confused why this stranger wanted access to my mailbox. "I need a copy of your mailbox key," she repeated, like it was a perfectly normal request. "I don't want to have to walk to the community mailbox every day. It's much more convenient if I can just get my mail from your box." I blinked a few times, wondering if I was being pranked. "Yeah, that's not going to happen," I told her. "I don't know you at all. Why would I give you a key to my mailbox?" She huffed loudly. "Don't be difficult about this. I'm your neighbor, so you should share your mailbox with me." I started to close the door on her. "No thanks. Have a good night." She stuck her foot in the door. "If you don't give me a key, I'll tell the homeowners association you're being uncooperative." At this point, I had enough of her crazy talk. "Lady, I don't know what world you're living in, but normal neighbors don't share mailbox keys. Now please leave before I call the police." I slammed the door in her face before she could argue any further. What kind of weirdo asks for their neighbor's mailbox key? That encounter left me feeling uneasy about my new neighbors. Over the next few weeks, Janet's behavior grew more erratic. She would stand at the end of her driveway and glare any time I checked my mail. A few times she marched over and demanded once again that I surrender my mailbox key to her for convenience. Each time I refused, she grew more irate. "You have no right to hog that mailbox all to yourself," she yelled during one encounter. "Sharing is caring." "This is my property and my mailbox," I explained as one would to an unreasonable child. "I'm not giving you the key." One day I came home to find my mailbox locked jammed with chewing gum. Janet stood nearby pretending to water her flowers, but I knew she had vandalized my mailbox. I decided then that I'd had enough of her crazy antics. I installed a security camera facing my mailbox to catch her in the act if she tried anything else. A few days later, I was in my kitchen when I heard shouting outside. I looked out to see Janet having an absolute meltdown. She was screaming at the mail carrier, who was hurriedly driving away. From what I could gather, she had tried to take the mail from his truck, and he had stopped her. She was pacing up and down the sidewalk, screaming, "They're my letters! Give me my letters!" I shook my head. This woman had serious mental issues. I made sure to save the footage in case I ever needed evidence against her. Things finally came to a head on a Saturday morning. I was sitting in my living room drinking coffee when I heard the familiar shrill voice shouting my name. "Tom! Tom! I know you're home! Open this door immediately!" I sighed and swung open the front door to find a red-faced Janet standing on my porch waving an envelope. "This letter was in my mailbox!" she shrieked. "You've been stealing my mail!" I glanced at the envelope she was frantically waving. It was addressed to me, Tom Gardner. "Janet, that's my mail you're holding," I said calmly. "Liar!" she screamed. "The mailbox is mine! You're stealing my letters!" "Janet, you don't own that mailbox," I tried explaining rationally. "It belongs to me. That's why it has my address on it." She refused to listen to reason. She shoved past me into my house, screaming about me being a thief and a liar. I hurriedly pulled out my phone to call 911. Janet had completely lost her mind. "He's a mail thief!" she cried to the operator. "I want him arrested!" I quickly gave my address and explained I needed police help with a deranged neighbor who had broken into my home. Janet was still ranting in the background about her stolen mail. Within minutes, I heard sirens. 2 police officers showed up and interviewed me and Janet separately. She spun some wild tale about me breaking into her home to steal her mail keys and hijacking her mailbox. The officers examined the envelope still clutched in Janet's hands. "Ma'am, this letter is clearly addressed to the resident of this home," one officer said. Janet still refused to concede, insisting the mailbox was hers. Meanwhile, I showed the officers my ID, property records, and the security footage proving my mailbox belonged to my house. Janet had no proof at all since she had made everything up. The officers asked if I wanted to press charges for trespassing and breaking and entering. I decided to give her one last chance and declined filing charges. However, I did request and receive a restraining order barring Janet from coming within 50 feet of my property. As the officers escorted the screaming, raving woman back to her house, I finally felt relief wash over me. The nightmare neighbor was out of my hair. The restraining order and threat of legal action if she violated it seemed to sober Janet up. She stayed far away from me after that. No more glaring or ranting about stolen mail. She even had her mailbox installed curbside like a normal person. I regretted not trusting my gut when I first met Janet. Sometimes your first impression of a person turns out to be right. She was every bit the unhinged, irrational woman-child I initially thought. I learned to follow my instincts, and I will never again make the mistake of giving copies of my mailbox key to strangers. The next one is a pro-revenge story. I worked for this small business IT consulting firm for 7 years, owned and operated by a person we will call Dick. The first 2 years were fine. Occasionally, this guy would take things a little too far. He was just passionate about his opinion and always had to be right, so I'd always give him that. I didn't have to agree, but I saw his need and left it at that. What I started to discover, however, is that the turnover for the company is a couple of years, and I began to realize why. The boss, Dick, picks one worker and makes it his life's work to make that person as miserable as possible. I'm guessing the reason is ego. For months, I'd hear him shouting all the time at this one guy. The coworker, after leaving the meeting, would go back to his office, and from where I had a view, I could just see the stress and misery on his face. Finally, I said to him, "What the hell, man? He's always giving you a hard time lately. What did you do?" He didn't seem to know. He confided in me right there about the level of hell he's in and some of the things Dick has said or done. I couldn't believe some of the details he shared on what Dick both said and did. I felt things were embellished because people just don't do some of the things he said. I would realize much later he was telling the truth, as crazy as it sounded. A few months later, he finally found another job and left. I talked to him a couple of times a year, and he always says it was the best choice he ever made. Dick's sights then narrowed on me. I can take a lot. So for the next 5 years, I took it. He would insult me pretty much every day, each day more and more colorful. I didn't really care or take it home with me, so it wasn't a problem for me. For Dick, I would learn it was. Unrelated, 5 years in, I put in my notice because he asked me to get a couple of certifications, and if I did, he would take care of me. Once I did what was requested, he backed out of the agreement and played coy. Once he received my notice a couple of months later, he called me up within a minute, begged me to stay. It's important to note he only asked for 2 certifications. I not only obtained those, but an additional 14 on top of that. Each time he would tell me, "Great job. You will be well taken care of." He lied 16 times in total on this matter. He matched the offer and increased my salary by another $15K. Not looking forward to starting a new job, I decided to stay. What I learned is I was a fool to do that, and money isn't everything. Go where you'll be the most happy. The best life advice I can give after this experience. He left me alone for a couple of months after that. He wasn't in the office much either. Then a day struck his fancy to start things up again. Only he ran out of material. My work is solid, and he had no opportunity to criticize that. The only method he had was bashing his ego and sarcasm around, but he realized it had no impact on me. Here is a brief snippet of any given day of what it's like to be selected as his target. He would communicate a problem he was having at length. Let's say he complained about his cell phone. After he finished his story, you would provide a helpful suggestion or advice from your experience. In turn, he would ask with an entitled and sarcastic tone if you were an expert on the matter and wanted to see those credentials. I learned fast. Just never speak unless spoken to. Any comment or insult he made, I would respond without emotion and just say, "Okay." Because Dick wasn't able to get a rise out of me the old-fashioned way, he decided to create fictional content for a new direction. Our small company would go out to eat as a whole or just order in on Fridays. I ate half my sandwich and wrapped the remainder to take home. He saw me with leftover food and claimed that I was taking home dinner on his dime. Anytime there was any leftover, even a single French fry, he'd be there with a magnifying glass for inspection to find any conceivable way to yell, So on Fridays, I started packing my lunch. I'd order a beverage and a side. I'd finish the beverage and the side, then eat what I brought. If I didn't finish it, he had no opportunity. You could see his look of disappointment when he would scan my plate. This went on for a couple of weeks. He had no opportunity and couldn't complain. He realized he failed again, so then he came up with the next item, the bathroom. This I actually did a little research on and couldn't find anything legally I could do, but anytime anyone would use the restroom, he would blame me for the smell. Instead of saying hello when passing in the hallway, he would say, "Did you use spray?" Or, "Did you light a match?" As hateful as he could, but that was his normal. It went much deeper than this, more than I care to share. But I honestly believe Dick has a fetish on this topic, which is why I looked into it legally. It was just always on his mind and a little too important to him. Let's just leave the rest unsaid. I must have visually tipped him off that I didn't approve of this because he never got bored with it. However, I did at least get him to stop asking about if I use spray. Anytime I used the bathroom, even to take a piss, I'd use the entire can of air freshener. This wasn't an easy task as I'd have to mask my face to empty that entire thing. Takes a while, surprisingly, to empty an entire can in a session. One thing is for certain, when I was finished, someone used the spray, and Dick was buying a new can. It took about 5 weeks, but I think he figured it out spending so much on spray. He stuck to just asking about matches after that. He even provided them in the bathroom. One day we were out with a client. The current topic at this moment was, "What is your favorite meal?" My answer was, "Hot wings, I could eat those every day." Dick jumps in, his comment, "Just think how bad the bathroom would smell." Most at the table wouldn't get the context and direction of that comment, but I knew. He did this in front of a client in public while people are eating. I almost walked out. Then I remembered he drove and it's a long way back, plus Dick is over 60. What kind of person knocks out a senior? I had to chant that in my mind to keep control. I never get pissed, but after years, this was the last straw. I seriously pleaded with myself all day not to do it because I'd go to jail and he would win. During this time period, he also started playing with my money. Behind 5 months with reimbursement, a week late on paychecks, stuff like that. You ask where it's at, he says next week. You explain he already said that last week, then he'd play coy. I finished out the day without reacting somehow. Took everything I had, but I'm not going to allow this to be unanswered. That was dangerous and too close. If he wants trouble, I'll give it to him. I will get even in a lawful way somehow. Then the idea came to me that night, did my research, and odds were in my favor that it could work. I'm just going to mirror him until he fires me. When he fires me, he will have to pay half my current salary of $65K until I get a new job. You know what? I can live perfectly fine on 32, $5K. Why not make him pay out of his pocket 32, $5K for everything he had said and done? He would have to pay this over the course of 6 months, or until I found a new job. So my goal was to make him pay me $32,500 to be exact over 6 months as restitution for what he said at that table. I read up on all the rules in my state for unemployment. Each state is different, but basically to qualify for it, it can't be your fault if you were fired. So if I stood there and told him where to put it, that's a no-go. However, if I was laid off, I would qualify. So I hit him where it hurt first. His favorite thing in the world is meetings, because he loves to hear himself talk and take you step by step through his thought process with a noble tone, congratulating himself for his thinking and why his way is the best way. So I started speaking up and illustrated a more efficient way that cost less. He would argue, sometimes red in the face mad, especially if others in the meeting liked my idea. He knew he was wrong, but he would dismiss them and demand it be done his way. I then started talking about him within earshot on purpose. I'd say things like, "Make sure you perform that Dick's way, takes longer, but it's better than him releasing the Kraken." It would make everyone laugh, but it wasn't a direct insult. Trust me when I say this guy has a massive ego, and I was counting on this for pissing him off. I laid it on thick. In time, it took its toll. I knew it did because of what came next. His retaliation was the kitchen sink. He had nothing, so he started accusing me of things, then playing coy when it came to reviewing the details or facts. He would put words in my mouth. I'd state he was wrong, and then he would tell me I was. All he was doing was opening the door so he could play a revengeful sarcasm game. I know it's a game, so I decided to take his new toy away from him by just going along with whatever it is he said. which further made him mad because what he was doing had no effect on me. Fast forward 6 months, yes, I'm still working here, but we're only receiving a couple of calls a day, which are 15 minutes each. This was due to Dick's bad business decisions. While I took delight knowing he was hemorrhaging money for months, I was hoping for a layoff to execute my plan. Nothing. I have to make him want to fire me. It's the only way. I have to beat him at his own game while providing the illusion he is in control. So I turned up the heat. I was asked to travel to a client by the second in command. I said, "I'm sorry, man, I haven't received reimbursement in 6 months for travel expenses, and I just had my work cell phone service turned off. With the way business is right now, things aren't looking good. I'd be stupid to take on more expenses, and I'm owed over $2,000 as it is. Once that's paid in full, I'd be more than happy to continue on a week-to-week basis after reimbursements." That day, Dick had a meeting with me and set up a payment plan to pay the money back. After 3 weeks, it would be paid. So I said to Dick, "Understood, after 3 weeks I'll be on the road again. Cool." Just making sure he understood because he wanted to play games and not pay the amount in full. Dick is now going to pay me my salary for 3 weeks to do nothing until the reimbursement fee is paid. The guy has a several $1 million house, goes on vacations, has boats, etc. Out of all the things I've done so far, this had made the most significant impact. Because I outwitted him at his own game, it embarrassed him in the eyes of others. Why? Because the second in command was instructed to drive me anywhere I was needed, so I had my own personal taxi driver for the few calls we had over the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks he paid 2 people, me and the admin, to drive and watch me work. I was friends with the admin, and he knew exactly what I was doing, and he loved every second of it. Then on the 3rd week, 3 days until the final payment, it happens. Dick enters my office and gives me the familiar demeaning dog wave gesture to follow him without speaking. We sit down and he asks me what the problem is. I told him the problem is he needs a new hobby. In one hand, you have someone sitting here that busted his ass for the last 7 years. In the other, you need to bash someone's face into the dirt with your ego. The problem with me is I won't conform and provide both. He asked for some examples. I said, "You know what I'm talking about, and even if I did review them, you'd play coy." He then played coy about being coy. I laughed. After a pause, he said, "If you feel that way, why didn't you speak to me about it?" I reminded him that I did twice, and both times you humiliated me for it and said, "This is IT." What the IT career that I've done the last 20 years had to do with his ego, I'll never know. He responded with, "I'm behind the times. My work has been poor, and out of the kindness of his heart, he gave me a raise after I demanded it." I responded with, "Okay." Then he finally said what I wanted to hear. "I want to call it quits." I remained professional and communicated. "I'm sorry things didn't work out," and spent the next 2 hours reviewing stuff with coworkers on how to handle certain things. I shook his hand with a smile and left without saying anything negative. The fruit of my labor will do the talking for me shortly. En route on the way home, I called family members to tell them the good news. Everyone was so happy for me. It finally happened. When I arrived home, I promptly adjusted the dates on the unemployment forms I had filled out already in Wait and submitted them. I called the state and confirmed everything was documented on my end accurately, and now it's the waiting game. My plan wasn't realized until my boss received the letter in the mail about a week later, stating he's going to have to shell out my salary for the next 6 months, or until I found a job. Panicked at this point, he realized what I set him up for, so he claimed he fired me for poor work performance. The state said, "Okay, prove it." In this state, it's the employer's burden to prove it. My record had no blemishes, and he couldn't use a client because a number of people at any given client would vouch for me, and the truth, as they all liked me and appreciated my work. Realizing the mess he's in now, I'm told from the admin friend he was on the phone with them quite a while, twisting and turning the fake stories out. Bottom line, the state needed to see documented verbal and written warnings, signed so he couldn't fake them. He called his lawyer, and his lawyer told him he's screwed. Later, my boss told coworkers he felt bad for me that I couldn't find work, and he decided to give unemployment to me to save face of his ego. That made it official that his ego was affected. He didn't want anyone to know the truth. At this point, he realized I got the better of him when I fought back, and I won. Big. In a last-ditch effort, he lied about how much I made. The state sent me paperwork stating this fact and asked me to prove my salary, so I gave them copies of checks and pay stubs for the last 6 months. After that, things went easy. he was flagged for lying, which made the remaining steps effortless, the state rep told me. For the reason I was terminated, I said, Dick, the owner made some poor business decisions that impacted the company, losing business and clients. He let me go as a business decision. In his shoes, I'd have done the same and understand. I wrote it that way for a reason, but Dick didn't realize why. I knew what his reaction would be. The state saw a down-to-earth guy that was honest and understanding on paper. Then they saw Dick's predicted response of being a dick, most likely yelling and, of course, lying. I had no doubt that would seal the deal simply on the evaluation of character before the facts even entered into it. His reaction being, his ego had to take it up the ass. Once for failing as a businessman, another for me saying so on state paperwork, and lastly accepting that I got the better of him, and all this time I have been coaxing him to make this move. The only thing left to do is pay me every single week, and his money goes to the state first, then the state sends it to me. So he can't play games with my money, or the state is coming after him. Over the next 6 months, I took that time to enjoy myself, pursue hobbies, and live life to the fullest on his dime as a reward for his comment. Once the letter came to renew unemployment, Dick would no longer have to pay, or only a percentage, I forget. The important thing to know is taxpayers would have to pay after 6 months, not Dick, so I declined the renewal. 3 weeks later, I had a new job. It was either that or knock him out during that lunch. It wasn't easy, took work, but I'm proud of the way I handled it. I feel vindicated. It's pretty rare the world is balanced. Evil often wins. But not this time. This time it cost Dick $32,500 to be exact. All in all, I can say 10 out of 10 would do it again. Due to his age, I can't imagine that it would be a humbling experience at this point. But it was for me. Money isn't everything. There is only one thing of true value, your happiness. A year later, I'm very happy now. I enjoy my new job and my new boss. I discovered myself again, who I really am. The goofy, friendly guy. My light is no longer dimmed by a dark presence, and I can be myself without punishment. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.